Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for tuning in to the Raise Your Own Bar podcast. My name is Tamara Bucky, and I'm so excited to be interviewing Megan Allen today. Megan Allen is a friend of mine I met out in Vegas at a conference. She resides in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, where she works as a program manager for the Air Force. She also volunteers her time with the Project Management Institute chapter in OKC as the vice president of programs. And she's also a musician and entrepreneur. She owns her own wine bar with her husband. Welcome, Megan. It's so exciting to have you.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Excited to talk with you.
Yes, it's very, very exciting to actually just get to talk like whatever we want instead of just focus on PM like we normally do. So I didn't know all this exciting stuff about you. I'm definitely interested to dig in. So we'll start with the boring details first. So you work for the Air Force and you're a program manager. And I say boring in jest because, program management can actually be really fun. But tell me about your career side.
Yeah, absolutely. I have been working for the Air Force civil service employee for the past 4 years. I definitely came to this job in a really non-traditional way. Most of my background is actually in education policy and sort of project and program management within the higher education system. And then I did a little bit of economic development for the city of Oklahoma City. And through that initiative, I was connected with our local software engineering group out at Tinker with the Air Force. They were kind of looking at doing some innovative things, getting plugged into the Oklahoma City community, and ended up getting connected with them that way. And so while technically my title is program manager for the Air Force, really for me, that means I just wear a lot of different hats. For those out there who may be familiar with the more traditional sort of program management sort of category within the US government, I don't actually operate within that space very often. Like I'm not an acquisition kind of program manager. Most of my time, all of my time in the Air Force so far has been spent on special projects. So I've worked to help establish community partnerships, academic partnerships, research partnerships for the Air Force, and then have most recently, over the past 3 years, have been working on a pretty massive organizational design project where we're taking all of the organic software engineering talent within the Air Force and combining them all into one organization. So, really kind of thinking about a way to kind of mobilize that organic software engineering talent in a more agile organization. So, that's really kind of what I've been working on the past couple of years. So,
Oh,
a little
wow.
bit of a non traditional path getting into kind of a government career there.
Well, that is exciting. It sounds like a really fun job because it's always going to be different. You're not kind of stuck doing the same because program management is just iterative in nature typically. So it sounds completely the opposite. Very, very exciting, very interesting. Love that because I have ADHD and I get bored easily. So that is definitely the kind of position that appeals to somebody like me. And then you got your PMP. What was that something that your job wanted you to get, or did you already have that to get your certification?
So that was really kind of self-driven. When I got my PMP in 2020, illustrious year. But at the time, I was working kind of more in an economic development role with the Innovation District in Oklahoma City. And I really started to do some reflection on, okay, what has my career kind of led up to at this point? What have I been doing? Where do I need to go? What other kinds of training or learning do I need to do? And really kind of through that really really awesome kind of reflection process that I did with a professional coach, by the way. Learned a lot of things, but one thing was, man, I have really just spent a lot of my career doing project management, even though I haven't really technically had those titles. So let me think about this credential because that might help propel me, in getting me to, to some other things. So that really kind of was a self-driven thing. And man, I'm so glad, so glad that I did it. I mean, certainly opened up doors, again, to go to work for the Air Force, but even more than that, being able to be a part of the PMI community has been an absolute joy. and has been a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I'm very grateful that that I have that certification for sure.
Me too. Me too. I just got mine in April of 2022, but it's been on my radar for a really long time, but I was intimidated by the test. So I kind of just like kept putting it off. Although I worked in project management and program management for a long time, but man, I'm so glad that I did because PMI has just been amazing. The connections, the camaraderie, the learning. I mean, it's really a cool community to be a part of. And I'm a part of a few other associations, and by far this is the one that I would say is giving me the most right now in my career and in my endeavors.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. I've gotten so much value out of being a part of that professional organization. So really, really glad that I did that. So
And that's how we met. That we wouldn't have met otherwise because we met out at the PMI conference in Vegas in 2022, which was awesome. And that conference was instrumental to me changing my entire career, quitting my job, going after my own sidebar things. I'd been doing raise your own bar stuff on the side for years, just like helping people a little bit here and there, doing some one-off projects and coaching, and it gave me the confidence to want to go for it. Although I still do project management stuff. I have a client that I work for every week that I do project management type stuff. So I'm still using it. It's still valid. So anyway, my ADHD gets in there. Okay, so what I was saying is it sounds really interesting, the project you're working on with the Air Force, where you're taking all of this talent and you're kind of pooling them under one umbrella to be able to pull from. I'm assuming you're kind of setting it up like a VMO, almost like a value management organization, where you're going to pick the talent needed for the the quick projects or the high level projects, and not necessarily based on tenure or hierarchy.
absolutely. So it really provides the Air Force with a more agile approach in selecting talent to work on different projects. And it helps us move away from the traditional, selecting talent based on where they are physically or geographically, and really thinking about capability and capacity instead. And so having the sort of organic software workforce all together in one organization really provides that ability to do that. So yeah, it's been a fascinating project. We're very early stages of the organization being launched and being a thing. So there's always growing pains, right? But ultimately, it really is a great move for the Air Force.
Yeah, and it's making me think that I wonder if the Army is doing something similar because, every branch should do something similar if it makes sense. In this case, for software, it seems like it would make sense for that specific or not industry, but that career field, because software, it doesn't matter where you sit. It doesn't, like, most of the time you're just behind a computer anyway, writing code or doing testing or, translating, user requests into updates. So very interesting to hear about how this turns out and what else within DoD picks up that mantle, because it sounds like it's going to be very instrumental to just trimming some of the fat and getting projects completed faster potentially, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. That is certainly the goal: increase efficiency.
Do you have to go into the office, Megan? Or are you on site or are you work from home or something?
It really kind of depends. It really kind of depends on what we have going on. Certainly, with our organization, we're meeting with a lot of folks on base, and actually around the country. So, doing a little bit of traveling, but I really do kind of have the ability to be on base when I need to, or to work from home when I need to. So it's a great mix for sure.
That sounds like good work-life balance. That's good.
Yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
kudos to DoD in general for, embracing that, because with COVID, it was kind of tentative there for a while on if they would really be comfortable with people working from home. But I believe even the IG reports came out and said people are just as productive, if not more so, at home because they don't have to stress. They can take care of their kids kind of, or, catch up on laundry while they're doing their work. I love it. I could not go back to an office. I really don't think.
Yeah, it really is, for me in a lot of ways. Now, granted, there are definitely meetings and other events where, being on base and being in person and being able to have that one-on-one exchange with leadership is just, it's not replaceable. But there are other times when, being able to be at home and I have my big monitors and, I can really be so much more productive. And for me also, takes about 45 minutes for me to get from my home to Tinker. And so it really is a loss of time,
Mm.
driving to base and home when, that's an hour and a half that I lose, right, of time that I could be working. So it is really nice. I'm very grateful that I have the flexibility to be able to do that for sure.
And emotionally, this is something I've been thinking about lately. Emotionally, dealing with traffic puts you in such a crappy mindset sometimes if you have to deal with it every day. I imagine it cuts into your productivity because you walk into the office maybe with the mindset of, I need to clear my head before I can even get started, and how much productivity is lost there. And then the same thing when you get home, you have to decompress because traffic was crappy. And before you can even really like interact with your family and get dinner going and whatever else. So that alone, getting rid of that traffic is just priceless.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Really, we can't complain too bad about traffic in Oklahoma City. It's not terrible compared to the rest of the country, but you're absolutely right. I mean, there definitely are times of the day when it is pretty bad and it can create that unnecessary stress.
yeah.
I would say kind of, a little bit of, on the flip side of that coin, at least on the way, like going home, sometimes it is nice to have that a little bit of like drive time, the separation between kind of work and home,
Mhm.
where when I'm at home in my home office, it's just sort of walking out the door. So I don't get as much of that transition. But for the most part, I totally agree with you. I don't like that drive.
It is cool though that you have the flexibility to do both because you're right. There is a time when you do need to be there in person and that one-on-one face-to-face connection is priceless. But for the most part, a lot of those meetings it could be an email.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the fun stuff. So we talked about the career stuff, which is awesome and very admirable what you're doing. Let's talk about the wine bar. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my husband and I are co-owners with two of our dear friends. So, there's four of us owners. The wine bar is called The Study, and it is in downtown Oklahoma City. If there are any Okies out there, it's kind of on the west side of downtown and what is known as the historic Film Row district. It's actually in an old, so it's called the Paramount Building. There's this part of Oklahoma City, kind of this rare history that a lot of people don't know, but there's actually still an active screening theater in this building. It's an old Paramount screening theater where movie companies would send out read ahead copies, right, of their films to local theaters across the country to sort of test them before they would go live to the broader audience. And Oklahoma City still has one of those active theaters. They don't use it that way still, but the theater is still operational. And then across the street, there are a few old MGM buildings that used to operate in that same capacity. So it is very much kind of a historic part of Oklahoma City that we were lucky enough to be able to open our bar in.
That
So
is so cool. I'm looking at your website right now, the study. It looks very upscale, very intellectual. It really looks cozy. Do you have all these books in here? Do people sit in here and read?
yeah, that was exactly kind of the persona that we're going for. So the concept is based around it's kind of a fancy French word. It's called a cruvinet, Cruvinet, and it is basically a nitrogen replacement system. So it allows us to put bottles of wine on tap. So we have 64 bottles of wine on tap, 32 red, 32 white. And the nitrogen sort of replaces the oxygen and allows us to keep the bottles fresh or up to 6 weeks. And
Hmm.
so that was kind of the concept that we built this whole thing around. Our co-owners really wanted the bar to have kind of a homey feel. So that's kind of what you see kind of on the website with the library kind of theme and the books, and the space is designed in a very kind of nooky way. So there's all these like little compartments that you can kind of, hunker down in, read a good book, have a good glass of wine. So that was kind of the look and feel that we were going for.
How cool. I definitely need to keep this in mind the next time I'm in town to go check out because it looks like it's a really fun place. And you started this with another group of people. You said a couple of friends and your husband. How long have you guys been in business?
So that's an interesting story. We were set to open, and so one of the co-owners is a dear friend of mine. She and I have been friends since middle school, and so her husband is a sommelier, so wine expert. So this really kind of was his brainchild. And basically, she was like, I need partners in this because if my husband and I open a business together, we will get divorced. So we kind of joined forces and, agreed to kind of go into this project together. So developed a business plan, went out and secured funding and kind of had everything ready to go. And we were set to open in March of 2020. And so that obviously did.
Got derailed.
Uh, so yeah, we were set to open, I think 4 days, three or 4 days after the city shut down with COVID. So we pivoted. There were things in our business plan that we had projected to try to implement about 3 or 4 years in. A couple of those things were kind of doing curated wine packs for people, doing wine tastings, doing those types of things. So what we did is we kind of were like, all right, so we've got to earn revenue somehow. How can we take some of those more out of the box things that we hadn't planned on doing till later and do them in a way that we could implement them in a COVID virtual environment. So we started doing virtual wine tastings.
Hmm.
We had, people were able to sign up for the wine tasting. They could come by the space, get the bottles for the tasting, very quick exchanges. And then we would host the wine tastings on Zoom. And we would send out packets with, information of like, with this wine, you might have these types of food on hand for the tasting, those types of things. So we did that. We did curbside pickup with curated wine bags or wine cases, whatever people might want to purchase. So we did that for the first couple of months. So from about March till May of 2020, and the end of May made the decision to go ahead and open up fully. So we did that. That was, of course, pretty challenging period because, certainly as bar owners, we want the bar to make money. We want people to come in and enjoy and have wine. But then also, on the flip side of that, really, we all are very committed to public health.
Mm.
And, so there's that concern, right? If you have too many people together, this was before the vaccine. So, really trying to do it in a way that, was committed to keeping the public safe as well. So that was a really kind of interesting time to go through. But, we learned a tremendous amount from that. We learned how to pivot quickly and to think of innovative ways to keep the business afloat. And we're still open. So I think, we've at least gotten this far. And I do have to give a shout out to the city of Oklahoma City. And that they did a fantastic job of really ensuring that federal COVID relief funds made it directly to businesses throughout the city. We actually got to participate in some of the development process for some of those applications, and it really was just a great experience. And then kudos to the city because they really did a great job of making sure that those funds were distributed in a really expeditious way, but also a way that really kind of targeted what businesses needed. For example, they were able to allow us to take a few parking spaces next to our space and build parklets outside to expand our seating footprint outside so that we could serve folks kind of in a more outdoor environment. So we were able to do all of that through funds that we got from some of the COVID relief programs. So it was an interesting time, but we made it through.
Well, that's great. Glad to hear Oklahoma City stepped up and took care of its small businesses because so many other places maybe didn't react in a similar manner and those businesses were closed. So kudos to you guys for putting on that, that flexible hat and being able to be creative and pivot so that you can continue to stay open and go forward with your business plan, even if it's not in the same manner you originally thought it was going to be. It sounds like it's turned out to be pretty cool, and I'll definitely check it out the next time I'm in OKC. And if anybody's listening, if you're in OKC, go check out the study. It looks like a pretty cozy spot. Looks like a great place to go for date night. And do you guys have small bites or do you have a full menu?
Yeah, just a small bite menu, a couple of different options for cheese boards, and some other just like nuts and snacks and things. But we do also, there's an amazing pizzeria that's right across the street.
Mm.
Pizzeria, and we have a partnership with them where if you order a pizza, they'll just walk it across the street to you. So it's a really great partnership. So
And pizza goes great with wine, as do cheese boards. That's great. That sounds perfect. So you're putting your wine through a system to make does it become bubbly with the nitrogen?
no, it doesn't become bubbly. It's just the nitrogen sort of replaces any oxygen that can get into the wine, and so it prevents oxidation. Oxygen is what kind of spoils wine over time. And so with the nitrogen, and I am not a chemist, at all. I know our sommelier could explain this so much better. If he were listening to this, he'd probably cringe. But it essentially preserves the wine in a way that can keep it fresh for up to, I think, between 4 and 6 weeks, depending on how old the wine is, how fragile it is, how close it is to already turning.
Hmm.
Those factors can definitely play into how long a wine will stay fresh. But it's a really just innovative system that it's purely analog. There's nothing digital about it. He got exposed to it when he worked in LA for many years, and there was a shop out there that had one since like the late 70s, and
Wow.
it's operating today. And it's a fascinating system, and it really allows you can come into the study and have wines by the glass that you would not be able to try by the glass anywhere else. Most places are going to make you buy a bottle, of really, anything super interesting. So it's a great business model.
Very cool. Yeah, I've never heard of such technology, but cool to know that he learned it from other places that are doing it. Very cool. So what do you like wine? Are you imbibing when you go in there yourself? Are you kind of a wine snob or
I definitely, I certainly enjoy wine. I don't know that snob is such a subjective term. It depends on who you're talking to. I definitely have a preference for what they like to call old world wine. So wine that is not domestic. It's, either from France or Spain or Italy. There's something about the soil. It's been, the climate's different. It's been cultivated for so much longer. That my palate tends to gravitate towards wine with a little bit more acid. So that's what that kind of generates.
okay.
And I am making sweeping generalizations, by the way. If there's anyone listening who knows a lot about wine, I claim to be no expert here. Typically, wines that you find domestically are going to be a little bit more fruit forward, not as much acid. So there's going to be a little bit more sweetness, a little bit more heavier on the mouth feel. So like it may have a more syrupy kind of feel in the mouth, whereas something with a little bit more acid is going to be lighter on the palate. So just personal preference. I know a lot of really, really great wine folks who really prefer kind of a domestic palate. So just depends on what you like.
Interesting. I didn't get into wine until I lived in Europe, so I also prefer, I guess, the old world style. I love French wines. I love German wines. Um, Also Australian wines too, which is not Europe, but Italian for sure. Italian, French, German. I normally buy wine in that kind of palate myself. I will drink things that are made here, but yeah, it doesn't seem to be the preference for me. And maybe it's because that's when I started drinking wine was over there.
It could be, yeah.
I typically go for a red though. I don't really care for white other than to cook with. I do cook with white wine a good bit.
Yep. No, I go through phases. I will have definitely like several months where I'm just like, all I want to drink is red wine, and then I'll switch back to white. Right now, I'm absolutely on a bubbles kick. I'm
Oh,
just really enjoying champagne and sparkling wine right now. So I just sort of like, I notice when my palate's about to change, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm headed into a red wine season or
that's so
whatever.
cool. That's cool how our bodies do that. I get in phases too with different things. Well, that sounds like you have a lot going on and you've got a lot of things to juggle and you're a mom. How do you manage to handle all of the things while you are, thriving in all of these different areas?
Yeah, well, and clarify, I'm a fur baby mom, but that definitely takes up quite a bit of time. But no, man, I think everyone deals with how do we juggle all of our priorities. Especially, I do feel like, man, after COVID, things have gotten just more intense. It feels like the demands placed on everyone have grown exponentially. And I don't know. I'm sure that there's ongoing research that hopefully maybe in 10 years we'll kind of be able to look back and really point to the reasons why. But, I kind of a catch 22 maybe of working from home is folks feel like they have kind of constant access to. And so
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of people are kind of in this stage of just all kinds of demands. um, and how do you juggle that? One of the things, couple of things that, and going through some coaching. So kudos to you for being in that space and helping people in that area, because it we need it. But when I went through that process, a couple of really kind of key takeaways for me was really kind of understanding my professional values and where those sit, and like how those are defined. And when I kind of got into that process, I was like, man, this feels really amoebus. Like, how am I gonna define my values? Like, what does that mean? But I went through this process, and really it is kind of a reflective process of really thinking about the things that you do in your career and your personal life that either bring you joy or suck suck the life out of you. And from there, really kind of diving deep into each of those experiences to kind of pull out the things that you really gain energy from, and that you really at the end of the day value. And for me, some of those values where I kind of learned that I value competency and I value intelligence and I value, those are kinds of things that I really enjoy spending my time around. And so just making sure that things that I agree to dedicate my time to are in line with those values. Um, and then another just very tactical level thing that I do is and I read about this in a book called Start Finishing, and I'm gonna blank on the author's name, but it's I think it's a fairly common concept, but the concept of time chunking, and really thinking about when you do the best types of certain work. And by that, I mean, like for me, I know that I'm going to perform best at work that really requires a lot of deep thinking. I need to do that first thing in the morning, because by the time I get to the afternoon, I don't have brain power left to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
So wherever I can, I prioritize, whether it's in my personal or professional life, right? I do this sort of same thing on the weekends too, of like, okay, these are the types of things I need to do in the morning on my Saturday morning and not wait till Saturday at 4 o'clock to do. Those things that really kind of pull that really kind of deep level brain power. Whereas in the afternoon, and I understand it's not always possible, but trying to save kind of the email cleanup, the miscellaneous trainings, because there's always training in the DoD, that.
Yep.
Always the training you have to do, trying to save that kind of stuff for the afternoon, so that I'm really kind of giving my best brain power when I know that I'll have it. Um, I work with people who are exactly the opposite. They really don't get started, in terms of their mental juices, so to speak, until noon or after. And so they really need to kind of like save those projects for later in the day. So really just kind of doing that self-evaluation to understand, when do you perform best,
Yeah.
and organizing your time that way. So,
I mean, knowing how you operate is priceless. I mean, that's really what started me on this coaching journey to begin with, is just learning so much about myself and then wanting to share that, those kind of revelations and how much they impacted my life with other people, because that's brilliant. I mean, how many people even are cognizant that they do better with creative work in the morning versus, you know, um, automation type activities in the afternoon. I know that about myself too. And I tend to be a night owl. So I can do more creative work in the evening and that deep work where maybe I have to go down the rabbit hole of researching and compiling data and analyzing information. I do that better in the evening, but I'm a night owl. So naturally it makes sense.
yep, absolutely. And I think it's really good to know that about your team too, right? Like to understand kind of when they operate at their best too, and when they're going to be firing on all cylinders. So that's something that I'm trying to work on to get a kind of a better understanding. But I tend to be the opposite. Like I'm definitely a morning person. Like after about 4 o'clock, I'm just like, oh, you need me to do what? I don't, I don't know. And then certainly like I'm like a early, like I'm in bed by 9 kind of person. So
I get my second wind around 9, so but I tend to stay up. I'll stay up until some 3 in the morning if I'm like I've been making slides for a new class I'm teaching. And so I've been staying up until like 3 in the morning working on slides. But then I sleep until like 10. So I have that flexibility, thankfully. I did
that's
want to mention I looked up the book Start Finishing. I haven't heard of this book, but it sounds like a really good one as somebody who is a procrastinator. And it's by Charlie Gilkey.
yes, that's it. Charlie Gilkey. And he's actually a former Army maybe Army Reserve member. It says in the book what his bio, but he is definitely former Army. So it's a fantastic read. I keep it on my shelf back there. So it's
Nice. I will have to add this to my Amazon cart because I'm an avid reader and I'm always looking for other books that, I can add to my library. This is just one bookshelf. I've got four of these bad boys and they're all filling up, but I love books and I love the feel of like a book in my hand. I do read some digital. Do you find yourself leaning
yeah,
one way or the other?
I'm primarily a Kindle reader, but only because I tend to wake up in the middle of the night, and reading is a great way for me to kind of calm my brain down if that happens. So, and I can't really just like turn on the light and like start reading an actual book or
Yeah.
one up. So, I do read on a Kindle, but I very much like if it's something like more professional focused, and I'm really trying to get something out of it. I like to have like the physical book that I can actually write in and highlight and take notes for sure.
I'm big in writing in my books with highlighters and underlining stuff and tabbing stuff. Cool. Well, this has been great. I want to just ask you one more question. How do you continue to raise the bar in life for yourself?
It's a great question. I would say kind of pulling on the thread that I was going on earlier, just man, making sure that I am making the time to listen to myself in all aspects. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but man, listening to my gut. So if there's a decision that I need to make, whether it's a career decision or a decision to take on a new project or whatever it might be, pausing to take the time to reflect on all kinds of different questions, right? Like, do I have the capacity to do this? Do I have the desire to do this? What value is this going to add before I just jump in?
Mhm.
I think a lot of times throughout my career, I have been that person that's like, yes, I will do that. Yes, I will do that. Yes, I will do that. And I think I'm reaching a point in my career where I'm like, okay, I'm going to think about it for a second to make sure that I am really living my life and spending my time on the things that do align with my values and bring value to my life. So I would say that would be my answer to that question.
I love that. Living intentionally is priceless. It makes me think of I have this little cheat sheet I use. It's like I call it my life scorecard. And
Ooh,
it's where you can kind of track these are the priorities I have, these are the things I care about, and then these are the goals associated with those things. And I have like for me, it's like wellness, family, creative, career. I think I have 5. And then you can bounce up anything you're asked to do or anything that somebody is like, hey, would you like to get involved with this thing? You can kind of bounce it off that scorecard and go, yeah, this actually doesn't hit this takes me further away from the things that are on my priority scorecard. Or, yes, this gets me closer to those things. So I love that you have that mindset. That is beautiful. And hopefully somebody else out there listening and can relate to it and say, you know what, I'm going to start living intentionally because I think it really makes a world of difference for happiness and just balance in life.
Absolutely. And I love the scorecard concept. I would
Yeah.
be interested to know more about that. I love that. That's awesome.
I'll send you it's just a super simple little thing. And yeah, it's just I've been doing a lot of talks with students lately, like middle school kids. And I've been just printing them out on like a quarter sheet and including them. I always give a little goofy like gift bag thing. So I've just been including that and encouraging them to like write down, what do you care about? Sure, it's going to look a lot different than what I care about, but everybody should have some sense of what are their priorities in life. So yeah, I'll send it over.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for
Yeah.
having me today. This has been a blast.
Yes. Thank you so much, Megan. You are awesome. It's great to have you on episode 3 of the Raise Your Own Bar podcast. I will be putting this out on Friday. I will make sure to share that on LinkedIn and tag you in it. That way you can listen to it at your leisure and share it with your friends or family. But this has been great. Can't wait to see you again in Oklahoma City, hopefully in the future.
Absolutely. Same to you. And thanks again.
Yes, absolutely. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.